has been covered before. I would like you to do a round of definition around the concept of what is a public good, or someone would start calling it Larson, plural good. So what is I would like you to be brief about it. Please name the one requirement for any project to be called a public or plural good and to be eligible for funding. Antonio, please.
Public good. There's a very specific definition around what is a public good versus what is a common pool resource. But a public good is basically the more you consume of it, it doesn't matter about the supply. And so if you were to look at like information, right, this is a public good. TCP IP, that is a public good. If ever, there's no limitation to the use, basically. A common pool resource is we actually have a limited amount. And so we get these definitions between public good and common pool resource confused a lot. But the public good specifically is it can never be finished. It can never be completely used. Like open software, this open source software is a public good.
So I guess I had a jump on this because I sort of defined it in my talk earlier. But for me, a public good is, it comes from the idea of a commons, and whether it's a service or a space or an asset, something that's accessible and kind of uplifts the community that gets access to it. And I think it also corresponds with different classification of capital, whereby you have things that are potentially pre-capital as we would define money, whether it's social, human, environmental, or other forms of public capital.
Great. Yeah, I don't have much more to add, to be honest, but I want to give it a bit of a spin. Actually, I guess you've met my two co-panelists, but I haven't introduced myself. I'm Nico Gallardo from Octant, doing community there. So I think that the spin that I would give to the definition is maybe more from the problem approach. So I think one of the main issues of public goods is the free rider problem. So all those things that are, let's say, being used by people and really like give a lot of benefits to multiple people, but because of its, let's say, abundance, in a way, they're hard to maintain, because although they're abundant, someone needs to maintain them and sometimes even create them. So I would just add that.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't have so much to add other than like public goods are the stuff that governments and nonprofits usually provide from a more practical standpoint.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Yeah, it's working. I would thank you, Griff. I would like to jump straight into the title track of our panel and talking about innovations. Is it working?
Yeah.
See? Okay.
The
innovation. Sorry. See?
Sorry, sometimes I have trouble hearing you when you speak. It's very muffled.
Yeah, we too have problems hearing ourselves. 1, 2, check. 1, 2, check. 1, 2, check.
Yeah.
So let's switch into innovation. What is the biggest innovation in project update, accountability, and donors processing that we have in these last rounds of Web3 funding?
Yeah, I mean, from my opinion, the biggest innovation in public goods technology in the history of mankind is blockchain tech. The ability for Bitcoin and Ethereum to create public infrastructure, not through donations, not through taxes, but actually through an economic means by issuing a currency, creating value for that currency. I mean, I know it's, what is it, like almost 15 years old, this innovation, or I guess even more, 16 years old, but it's historical because public goods have really been difficult for people to manage for a long time, and especially the funding for it. But the way that Bitcoin and Ethereum solve it is in this way where you're almost like if you're a startup founder and you want to start a tech startup, you have limited upside. And that's the same with this technique for funding public infrastructure, where you can actually have this insane upside that is very attractive to entrepreneurs. So I'm really excited about that. And we haven't cracked the code on how to bring that into meat space yet. It's still something that really works only in digital infrastructure. But I think that there's a lot of promise there. And I'm confident we will crack the code. I'll pass it to the panel, though.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's public goods and this confluence of this startup space, right? And so you have these Ethereum as an ecosystem, as a public good, as a public blockchain, Base, Celo, Arbitrum, Optimism, all of these other L2 ecosystems that need to attract builders to come and create in the commons, to come and create in the public good space. And so there's this dynamic where it's not like, where does the public goods funding end and the VC funding begin? And I think this may be what Griff is talking about with the tokenization potential. But right now, there is massive amounts of funding moving through the ecosystem for public goods funding. There is a massive amount of small, young startups. And we're seeing this now with outreach into the global South, Africa, LATAM, Southeast Asia. This is where the adoption is. This is where the users are. This is where the financial revolution is happening. And so how do we get the funding from these treasuries to sustainably flow through these startup ecosystems in a way that's giving value back to those DAO treasuries like we saw with public nouns, right? Like, how do you keep that sustainable, giving out funding for the builders? And so there is an innovative solution. I mean, much props to GiveEth, much props to Octant as well, Endowment. There's a lot of amazing infrastructure that already exists where small startups like myself and Refi Italia, we don't have many options to go get funding. And so we've been very fortunate to get funding through GiveEth, through Gitcoin, through Octant. And because I started as a user with Karmahq.xyz, which is basically like, think of a LinkedIn. It's your resume. You have a project. You're getting funding from these different grant rounds. You're going onto that platform. You're making your updates. That is being attested on-chain. And so you have basically a living record of your accomplishments that you can take with you between different ecosystems. And so how do we get the funding to come in? The allocators are making intelligent decisions on who to give to. Those projects are receiving the funds. They're making the progress. They're making the updates. They're getting the traction on-chain. And then all of that's getting reported back into this information feedback loop. And so that's what Karmahq.xyz does. And there's a lot of basically we're building a full stack all-in-one funding and accountability platform. And for example, you go on the Octant website, the people that have received the funding have their impact metrics automatically updating through Karma to the Octant website. And so there's really cool integrations that you can build with the reporting. And this is the kind of the sustainability loop that we want to get into with, we are using the public goods to sustainably fund public goods. And it's the infinite, what's that? The hyperstructure? So I'll stop there and would love to hear what everybody else has to say.
Okay, I'll dive on real quick then. So I thought there was a huge amount of innovation, let's say 2023, 2024. I was more actively pursuing public goods funding at that time in my role at Endowment. And I thought that there was a huge benefit from reflective governance. I've been in European Commission funding circles for, on the receiving end, but also seeing other projects getting capital. And there's a lot of waste often. But within blockchain ecosystems, there's a chance to, govern, reflect, report, attest to things. And I think these were some of the biggest innovations that I saw in the space, speaking to the question of innovation. One of the things that I then saw was there was a flight of capital away from public goods. And I think that a lot of those innovations haven't been fully utilized yet. So really excited to hear about what's new and what I may have missed as well. And, passing on to Octant, who seem to be innovating.
Yeah, V2. Yeah, so for those who don't know, Octant, V1 of Octant was basically staking 100,000 ETH and funding public goods with the yield that was generated with it. And the way the funds were distributed was in epochs of around 20 to 30 projects, and people who locked the GLM token, the Golem token, could vote on which projects are allocated. And the way that these funds are allocated, because you also vote with your money, and to avoid the issue of like a big whale voting for a project and that project receiving a large amount of matching funds, we used a quadratic formula. Who here is familiar with quadratic funding and quadratic formula? Okay. Who is not, maybe? Okay. So like the TLDR of the quadratic formula is that it benefits. So there's like a matching fund that's going to be distributed to projects, and then there is donors who, let's say, vote with their money. So to avoid the problem of a project receiving the largest amount of funds from one donor who gives $100, let's say, it benefits the project who receives, instead of $100 from a single person, $100 from 100 different people. So let's say $1 each person. So this model was innovated not by Octant, by multiple people, and also used by Giveth and multiple other platforms. And what we're doing with V2 is basically, because so the way I see the challenges and innovations that are possible in the public goods funding space with Web3 is, if you split it into capital formation and capital allocation, I think in the space we've been focusing a lot on the capital allocation side of things. So quadratic formula, and there's a bunch of other allocation mechanisms like conviction voting, retro PGF, all these things. But there has not been a lot of focus on the capital formation side of things. So how do you pool the money? And this is what we're trying to solve with Octant V2, is this model of utilizing the yield that's generated and distributing that, and basically keeping the principal untouched, so keeping the treasury full, so that other ecosystems can do the same and generate yield and only fund public goods with the yield that's generated, so it doesn't feel like a loss to them. So in general, I think a lot of the innovations and challenges can be seen through this lens of like separating between allocation and capital formation, let's say. Yeah. So maybe that's an interesting.
I would like to drift from what you said, and I think that we also, like, we shouldn't expect to be always new, but we also leave some obsolescence behind us. Every new round, there's something, an old skin that we leave in the past. I have something that I would like you to maybe help me understand between who established the mix between who establishes the truth about what is a public good, if it's a top-down criteria, if it's a support or collusion and lobbying, and the nature of matching funds. Like when they are private sponsored, they are sort of easy to secure, but what are the risks therein? Like the admissibility criteria, sometimes protecting the mission of these funds, like there are, and that's maybe why we are so fragmented still in the space. Like I would like to see a unified grant system, but maybe that's inefficient, and maybe because there are different agendas in funding. So what is, maybe Griff, you want to say something first? Yeah?
Sure. I mean, I think we get too hung up on the semantics around public goods. There's a lot of companies. I mean, it's really challenging. Like, if for distributing funding, does it matter more how your company is structured, or does it matter the impact you've had? Like in the Ethereum security space, there are a lot of very well-funded auditing companies like Open Zeppelin that are providing insane amounts of public good value just by managing open source repo with very well audited code that you can trust. Should we reward Open Zeppelin for that public service? This is kind of up to the people who are bringing in the capital most of the time, there's someone, or like, I really like what Nico said about like separating capital formation from the capital allocation. And generally the people who, just like in the nonprofit space, the people who are forming the capital, the people who put the money in, have a lot to say about how it's distributed, the eligibility requirements, and that whole process. And so it kind of just matters where the money comes from. I can't say that there's a right or a wrong. If you're funding nonprofits and public good work, like, dude, hero, right? You know, how you want to structure the scope. In the end, we can't just fund everything, right? There's too many great things that need to be done. So you have to scope it somehow. And I think it's just up to the people who created the capital to decide that. And I don't think that there's a right or a wrong.
Thank you.
But I'll throw it to the panel. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in like creating better systems that are more inclusive for more things to get done, and for there to be, I think you're seeing it with AI as well, like reflective governance is really important alongside expansive systems. And, you know, I'd be really interested, you know, if you're able to disclose where the capital's coming from for Octant, and if you have like routes to like bring in capital in. I think that's a really important problem. How do you bring more capital, more intentional capital in? And then, yeah, the governance aspect, the systemic aspect, that's something that building in public helps. And just watching how things go is really important. It's very basic stuff. And a lot of systems for capital allocation in the public sphere didn't have this sort of stuff built in, whereas I think with Web3, it's quite easy to build it in natively.
Yeah, I can touch a little bit on your question, where the funds from Octant come from, because it's a lot of it that we have. And it actually is from Golem was a project from the ICO era, like one of the first. So they raised a lot of money with the goal of creating a decentralized computing project. The project didn't play out as it wanted for a few years, and then when Ethereum shifted to proof of stake, and they still had a bunch of ETH in the treasury, they decided, okay, one of the most impactful things we can do right now is to stake it and fund Ethereum public goods to, let's say, give back in a way. So that is, of course, like a very unique kind of scenario that it's very hard for it to be repeated, and you know, for people to decide, like for the management to decide, okay, no, let's actually do something good with all these funds that we have. But I think the key is in creating systems that have like generated incentives for people to do that. And I think there's a lot of things that align quite well in the Web3 space. So the fact that, let's say, chains, L2s, or even DeFi protocols benefit from composability and modularity, and other builders building on top of it, and on top of their open source public good code. I think there's like a sort of like feedback loop that you can generate there, where you incentivize builders to build on this open source code, and for that reason increase the value of the project itself. And that way, if you want projects to keep their capital while keep incentivizing their builders to continuously grow the project, then you can use something like Octant, where it's only the yield that's distributed to those builders, which they could, as Griff said, like they could have like their own business models on top of like all the public goods that they're contributing to. And I don't see it as a bad thing either. Just giving them the capital to keep doing that or even kickstart that, I think is the key.
Mm-hmm. Antonio, you wanted to?
Yeah. So I don't think, well, it's great to have 100,000 ETH. It would be wonderful if we all had that. How do we make it more accessible? Because I think, what was it? Public goods are the realm of governments and NGOs, right? Big institutions. And Web3 is all about decentralization. And so how do we make it easier for anybody to support public goods, anybody to fund public goods? Everybody is benefiting from it. Everybody should be able to contribute as well. And so I feel like pump.fund meets public goods. Like, how do we enable more positive speculation, right? Like, what about a token that cannot be rugged? Like, what?
Yeah,
that doesn't exist.
That will never exist.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I think it can be more fun. It can be, I think more people can participate, and I think we're getting to the point where we can actually experiment. But ideally, everybody got so burnt on Pump.fun, it was actually a net negative on the space, right? Like there was some technical innovation. Futarki is now getting played out, the poly market, but it's also like draining and degenerative as well. And so how do we make regenerative, how do we make public goods financing regenerative?
Yeah, I think Vishal wants, yeah.
Well, there's a model that...
For nonprofits, because I'm literally working on that. I've been working on that since 2019, basically. And one of the things that I've really learned, I made a launch pad a couple of years ago that is still going, but it's like the 12th largest launch pad by TVL. It's called Quadratic Accelerator. And one of the things I learned for that, because I was trying not to launch meme coins, but to launch tokens for real projects. And man, if you're as opposed for a grant program. So there were some really nice projects that came through that are real projects trying to build real things, and trying to launch a token alongside running your own project is basically impossible without major funding and like a good leader for the token product and another good leader for the actual work that you're trying to do, the real product. I think this is why meme coins have gone so far. And so with Giveth, we're actually looking to create a token launchpad for meme coins, but where the fees go to nonprofits on Giveth. We call it cause markets. It might end up, because there's this weird thing in crypto where it seems like when you add impact to a token, people hate it. I don't know why that is, but it's like there's a lot of negative perception with speculators around adding any sort of impact. So we might even have to hide the fact that there's impact happening, so that people don't get scared. But if you think about it, like look at the state lotteries. I know Nico loves lotteries. Look at the state lotteries in the US. They all fund schools, but the commercials don't talk about funding schools. They talk about like, hey, this guy could win. This guy just won $1 million. That could be you. Buy our lottery ticket. But I wonder if we can find those mechanisms in here so that, yeah, degens love to gamble. Let's let them gamble. Let's do that thing. But then behind the scenes, let's add impact. Let's get to the developers that are doing this stuff and make it super easy for them to launch a token, do their thing. And behind the scenes, there's money funding public goods. They don't care. They don't have to think about it. It just happens. And that's what we're trying to actually build right now. I'm doing interviews. If anyone's ever launched a meme coin, I'd love to talk to you because we're doing user story interviews around like what features should be in a launch pad that people would want to use. But instead of the profits going to Pump Fund or whatever organization is running the launch pad, the profits would actually be going to nonprofits on Giveth and funneled to them through a feature that we called causes, where there's basically we just automate the whole distribution. So funds come into a cause, and AI actually decides how to distribute the funds to the nonprofits that are part of that cause, so that it's all automated. The meme coin launcher or whatever token they're launching can just focus on, the actual product of the token, get people to buy the token, and then the funding of nonprofits is just automated for them.
Vishal, do you still have a point, or yeah?
Yeah, three things. I don't know if you can hear me, but so yeah, three things actually. So one, I think there is like a virtuous version of Pump.fun already, because there was the DeSci movement moved into kind of a spin-off of Pump.fun for Pump.science, and there were a lot of projects that spun up research. I chuck some money into some, let's see what happens. But like you basically, they leveraged the Pump.fun architecture to fund like research into things like long COVID, there's Cerebrum DAO, there's, quite a few quite interesting movements there. So I think that's also potentially a very good model for, a meme coin doing something virtuous. I think it's funny, the whole thing about impact not being good for the underlying token. But I think the lottery example is really interesting because the whole European funding movement around social innovation started with the UK lottery funding something called Nesta in the UK. If you've not heard of it, then it's really worth looking into it. And they initially started with a bunch of cash, and then they realized this isn't sustainable. We need to create businesses that actually make a profit. Otherwise, we're going to run out. And then they basically created the digital kind of innovation infrastructure for Europe that people are probably still using today. They had a movement called digital social innovation. If you look at archive.org, you'll find lots of references there. But that really works as a model. Like you detach the origin of the capital to where the capital's going. That works really well. And then I think the other thing is Ethereum is kind of almost too serious sometimes. I feel like, Gitcoin's kind of done what it's done, and like I don't know how active they are in the space. And there's layer 2s that have tried to pick up the mantle, and many successfully as well. But I don't think we have that sort of furore that you get with Solana and the Solana ecosystem. And I think that's something that kind of needs to break a little bit for people to just kind of want to ape in, try stuff, and experiment more. And I think that would be really valuable for the ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you. Griff already anticipated a little bit how AI can step in as a tool for public goods. I would like also you to sort of sell the dream and show us some foreseeable future of AI implemented in public goods funding, but also what is the roadmap for AI to be a public good?
My favorite first experience with AI was I think it's Ace. There was a bot that was doing kind of crypto market reads. It was AI BT something or other. It's still there, or XBT or something like that. And it was basically just kind of doing commentary on the market, and it's a fun thing. And it got a huge following. It's all automated. I think people should be able to and should be encouraged to. And this is where what Griff was saying about you don't know what a public good is sometimes until it emerges, to just try stuff. And there should be incentive for people. There should be competitions. There should be things that can be funded retroactively, whatever. Where people are just trying things, whether it's implementing lotteries, whether it's whatever, and it doesn't matter the route to get to the next stage. It's just making sure that something comes there. And I think there's a lot of things that have already been tried within other parts of the industry. So I think there's try something new, try stuff like that. But for me, I think obviously social media and chatbots is already very well established as a way forward to get attention. Maybe that's something that can live on Ethereum and within one of the L2 networks. But I think being a bit crazy and being a bit creative isn't a bad thing in this space. And I think often it can get too serious. And I think we're in a phase where we need to build again, especially with AI.
Nico?
To be honest, I think either Vish already shared a view, and I think probably Griff with his experiment has a better view. I only interacted in one instance with AI funding public goods, and that was with Gitcoin in the last round did an experiment where you could sort of give or vote for one of 3 candidates that had a different sort of mandate.
Region communist?
Yeah, exactly. A region communist. I don't know, open source, Panda, and some other
capitalist.
Yeah, exactly. I can't remember the names, but they were hilarious and very fun to interact with because it was a chatbot that told you yeah, this is what I would distribute the funds to, etc. That was a good experiment.
Just riffing on that though, people ask what's quadratic funding. Almost everyone in the room knew what it is, which is cool. And it's really a good system, but people will still criticize it or not know about it because it's not that exciting. So you can create counter systems which are actually bad and just see what reaction that provokes. And I don't think it's the worst thing to experiment in this space. And in this space, you could do perverse incentives that have good results. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that as experiments, at least.
Yeah. Antonio, you have something?
Yes, we've been doing a few experiments with AI. Last Gitcoin round through region coordination. Basically, we would take all of the data from Karma, from all the participating projects, and then we would run all of that data through different AIs, right? So we'd have a prompt that would be standard, and then we would deploy that prompt across Claude, ChatGPT, feed it all of the impact data, and then we had a formula for doing it. Like, so you have quadratic funding, you can also do impact funding, where the funding you receive is dependent on the impact that you create.
Right.
And so that was cool. I mean, it was a little tedious, like where we had to actually go and, upload the data to the individual LLMs, and that could be definitely improved in terms of like just having the MPC server running in the background, where you just don't have to manually do that. And then the other one that's really interesting is called Gaia AI, which is a chatbot that lives on Twitter. And then you basically say, hey, Gaia AI, Gaia AI is basically distributing $1,000 to projects. And the AI has basically its own internal logic of how it is distributing funds. And so basically you can say, hey, Gaia AI, what do you think of my project? And so it's an AI that is already distributing funding based off of certain criteria. And then I think kind of like long term, and we talked about this in the morning about privacy and decentralization, and eventually AI needs to be distributed and basically be living locally, right? And what is the ultimate public good? And we've talked about this yesterday with like everybody needs air, water. We have the basic like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we need to be using AI to be managing those public goods and those common resources to make sure that we do have the fresh air, we do have the healthy forest, healthy ecosystems. And so we need to be using AI more for like ecological awareness and sense making, as opposed to just saying, hey, we're going to just max out the advertising revenue, and now it's just we're living in even more of a Black Mirror dystopia.
Yeah. Last question. And
AI has the opportunity to be one of our biggest public goods. I mean, we got to get the server costs covered, but there's so many things. If there was just we do public education. What if there was a first grade teacher, AI teacher that was just awesome, and totally free for anyone to access? First grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade. And what if there's so much there's so much opportunity in all fields of expertise to just be providing, an AI on the spot? Like, what about AI therapist? Every person who's homeless could have an AI in their on a device that they could talk with and work through some of their challenges. There's so many opportunities with AI that I think if we can crack a code where developers, like people who can build these tools, can actually make a profit by providing these things, oh my God, it would be an insane boom for humanity. Otherwise, we're going to end up in that Black Mirror episode, like you're saying, where it's like, if the profit incentive is, oh, we got to get people to buy shit they don't need. Okay, well, that's what people who are building AI will build for us. And it's so tragic. That being said, I do think there are some great innovations in the space around capital allocation that can be done with AI. I mean, that's what we're building with causes that I mentioned. It's the kind of an impact assessor or charity navigator style AI that just assesses which nonprofits have more impact relative to this cause and looks for the latest information on them and stuff like that. But I think that there's the opportunity with this tech is boundless in almost every field, especially the public goods field.
Okay, thank you. I would like you to be extremely brief on that. And this is our closing question. If you could delete one grant program ritual, what would be?
Delete one?
Yes, just trash one ritual out of grant programs. What is it? It's going to take 20 minutes thinking and 1 minute answer.
I did a European Commission grant. I would trash reporting. It has to be automated because it just wastes so much money.
Yeah, I agree. Very much agree. Antonio?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do with Karma. Deleting one thing, I think that deleting the insider grant farming, or basically giving grants based off of vibes.
All right. Okay.
So it's basically who you know, not what you actually want to do.
Okay. So you could know the project, but not read anything about who's the project. So sort of ZK donations.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually gonna say something similar, or like what solves this. Like what I would eliminate is like this transparency in grants fund, like from the donors, because that's what creates, I think, like, oh, I need to vote for my friends because they're gonna get angry. So the positive framing of that is like add privacy to grants allocation.
Shall we commit to that in 6 months? We run anonymous.
Also remove choice. Like if you remove reporting, if you can remove choice, it reduces friction as well. I'm not saying it's necessarily the good result to start with, but if you can remove choice completely and things become automated.
What do you mean by
like all the voting and the chats and the lobbying and it works.
Yeah.
But it's not efficient.
Yeah, I will say, so when these Gitcoin rounds do happen, and this is like almost have like PTSD from these Gitcoin rounds, because it's constant shilling. You have to be on the Twitter spaces. You have to be constantly present on the timeline, shilling.
You burn your social capital to get real capital.
No, I mean, I think it's kind of fun in that, okay, yeah, we're getting the word out, but also too, after 2 weeks of Gitcoin fundraising 24/7, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And so if there's a way where it's less about just being constantly on, yeah, exactly, the people that make the loudest noise are the ones who get the money.
Yeah.
So,
Griff?
I think this whole like open forum post style grants are just horrible, where it's like an open RFP, like, kind of along what you said for the insiders, the hyper, what's it called? Oh my God, I'm blanking on them, but, the new perps exchange, Hyperliquid, they did a proposal, open RFP process for the, stable coin, who's going to get their stable coin, right? And so all these people wasted all this time defending their proposal in public when it just went to an insider anyway that was been working with them for a long time, a stable coin provider you've never heard of that's just been in the Hyperliquid community forever. That's the kind of program that needs to go away, because it wastes everybody's time. It's totally inefficient. They know who they're going to give it to anyway. So what's the point? And that's the kind of, I actually think it's really difficult, and it's kind of along what you're saying also about direct funding. It's really difficult to have to justify yourself publicly and just like open yourself up to the trolls and the challenges of that. And while I'm a DAO guy, like through and through, I think there's better ways to do these things than sometimes always in the public, because it just puts too much unnecessary work on people,
Wait, Griff, we have...
Just talk to the specific decision makers that you need, and, that hopefully your project can win on merit, not how loud you can be.
But it's choosing high leverage as well.
We have a disagreement with what Griff just said. Sorry.
You might want to tell
basically what
the audience.
All of you said now, I'm just wanting to do the counter. Who here is a VC and has invested in projects? I mean... Yeah, okay. Who here has supported grants? No, I mean, basically, if you're going to put money on a project, I mean, I know that blockchain wants to replace trust, but in the end, you are betting on the people to put that project forward. So I think actually the shilling and all the work that you need to do to convince people that you are the one that can put the project forward actually has a very important role in grant funding. I'm not saying it should completely replace automation or something, but I think that is very important actually.
Yeah, if I can respond quickly, because there is another thing we haven't, another meme that we haven't introduced yet today, BioFi, which is bioregional financing, which is an organization. They've done QF rounds in the past. They're very active, and they do a lot of workshops on, like, it's not necessarily Web3. It's more of just general regenerative finance. And one of the concepts that they've been promoting is what's called flow funding. And so we may be, like, we're all kind of familiar with retroactive funding, right? Like, you did the work, we saw the work, and we're going to pay you for it, for work that you already did. What flow funding does is it goes through networks of people. So you have maybe a local leader, and then they have the trust, they have the relationships. And so they can say, well, I'll give you the money up front. And so that money is flowing forward. And so that is one thing that doesn't really exist on chain, but it could be. But we absolutely should respect and value those interpersonal relationships. But if it's, of course, going to insiders, and there's almost like how do we trust in a trustless way? But there are examples out there. So flow funding, BioFi, that's just my addition to the...
Yeah. Sorry, guys, we have to cut because we have the last piece of talk today. Thank you for joining. Griff, thank you for connecting. We'll see you in Buenos Aires, I guess. And stage is yours, Alessandro.
Thank you, Griff. Thank you, guys. Thank you.